From Pacifica Radio, this is Voices of the Middle East and North Africa. I am Malihe Razazan, and with me here is Khalil Bendib.
After 4 decades under dictatorship, Libyans held their first General Congress election, the first in a sequence of steps designed to lead to represented elected government in Libya.
I think what really has been missing, and nobody could really understand it, is the fact that there is tremendous rise of Libyan nationalism, Libyan awareness of the fact this is now a democratic transformation and a society that really also shows the other side, positive side, a modern society, a literate society where women have been participating in a tremendous, wonderful way.
Tonight we speak with Ali Ahmida, professor of political science at the University of New England, about Libya's first truly democratic election in almost 60 years, which happened Saturday and Sunday, and whose results are still being counted as we speak. Then we bring you a talk we had with popular Tunisian singer Emel Mathlouthi, who came to prominence in Tunisia during the revolution. Malihe spoke with her about her involvement in Tunisia's revolution and about the situations for Tunisian artists in the post-Ben Ali era.
Last weekend, millions of Libyans went to vote in the first democratic election in more than half a century. And despite exaggerated fears of electoral violence, according to neutral international observers, the elections unfolded in a relatively peaceful and orderly way. Khalil Bendib spoke with Ali Ahmida, who's a professor of political science at the University of New England, about the significance of Libya's election and that country's transition to democracy.
Professor Ahmida, this election in Libya, the first free election, certainly in the past 50, 60 years, carried enormous symbolic significance as a harbinger of stability for the country. Do you feel this was an essential step to cement the state in post-Gaddafi Libya?
It's a very, very important step forward. I wouldn't exaggerate to make it, a point that is going to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if we take exactly what you said, that the last fair election happened in 1953 under the monarchy, I would say that this is the first true election that represented the wishes of the people without any fraud, without any manipulation. And I think if we take the context, Khalil, of a country that just came out of a bloody civil war and a very, very bankrupt dictatorship, and a country that has arms and militias everywhere, this is a tremendous step forward and really has larger meaning that we may want to think about it as far as why it succeeded the way it did and why many people did not really anticipate that success.
Yes, there have been quite a bit of violence over the past year across the country in different places between different militias, and people are becoming a little bit pessimistic. But I guess these fears for a violent or unruly election were exaggerated.
Yes, to a point. I would say the fact that these things happen and happening sporadically here and there are a reality. We cannot deny that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think especially if we think about the thousands of guns and arms and tanks everywhere, and also there is no national army, no national police, and no functioning government to talk about here, then they are really expected. I think what really has been missing, and nobody could really understand it, is the fact that there is tremendous rise of Libyan nationalism, Libyan awareness of the fact this is now a democratic transformation and a society that really also shows the other side, positive sides, a modern society, a literate society where women have been participating in a tremendous, wonderful way in the Libyan South, 90%, and also the values and also the tradition of organizing themselves, which has completely surprised most of the scholars and most of the commentators who really had no clue about it, and they reduce Libyan society to the ideology of tribalism and the ideology of fighting people with no consciousness. I think this is the larger lesson that made these theories and notions very much irrelevant and those commentators, they fail to grasp where these traditions, where these communities came from, and why they are really rising despite the militias, despite the lack of state institutions, despite the fact that they are devastated by a civil war. And now, by all standards, it was a decent election, and I think in many ways a good story.
Another positive development in this election is the turnout in Sirte and other Gaddafi stronghold. It was high, but in some places between 60 and 70%, according to some estimates. How do you explain that even in strongholds that were relatively pro-Gaddafi, there was such an enthusiasm for the electoral process?
People are very hungry for representation for a long time, and also people are fearful of the danger of security, lack of security, lack of rule of law, the lack of the fear of Libya going into a very dangerous road, like becoming a failed state, and also a Somali-like a country. I think that awareness led many people in the country, including in certain and also other parts of the country where they were supporting the old regime, feeling like this is really their moment, this is their chance to elect people who are representing them and their views and their concerns, and also that might bring stability and security to the country.
Over 339 parties and 2,563 candidates competed for a combined 200 seats in the General National Congress, or GNC.
Right.
The nation's first elected body since 1964.
Yes.
Tell us the significance of the election and what are the next steps to a constitution and a government sanctioned by the people of Libya.
I think the number of political parties for a country with 6 million people is a little bit high. I would say maybe I was teasing my brother and sister. It's a political party now.
Yes.
So
it happened in Algeria as well, with the first election ever. Hundreds of parties, even some teams became political parties.
I think this is the only way to make sense of this is to understand that Libyan society, or Algerian society for that matter, have been censored and controlled for a long time, despite the social, economic, and educational changes and also transformations. And very much these societies are aware of what they want. They're really hungry for freedom of expression, for determining their own affairs and their own livelihoods. And when freedom came and people could organize and express themselves, it mushroomed everywhere. Here we are talking about all kind of communities, not only urban areas, also rural areas. And in that sense, it doesn't surprise me. This is a long awaited moment, and people are just celebrating that. Now, to be honest with you, when I look at the programs of many of these political parties, I see really not much difference if you ignore maybe the difference between a religious agenda or political agenda. But that's okay. I think this is really a transformation. This is a moment where even you have some Salafi groups, some crazy organizations, a group of people who have a party or so. This is a moment of political expression, and the process and the change will really reduce them into maybe either bigger groups or really disappearance. So this is a phase that's needed.
It's a first step and a step in the right direction.
Exactly. And I think the fact that there was at least many political organizations, at least 150 political parties, it doesn't surprise me. This is really historically the moment where people wanted to really organize. Now, quite honestly, Khalil, these parties, some of them are really just a small group of people. But at the same time, the process that happened after the collapse of the dictatorship in Libya necessitated the rise of all political forms of expression, and that happened in Libya. I think it's a very interesting expression.
How was this first step, this important first step, designed to lead to the next steps towards an elected government and constitution?
Well, there are two important points that we need to pay attention to. The first is this is going to legitimize the 200 members of the General National Council that's going to elect a president, a prime minister, help the process of writing a constitution, and in a year and a half or so will supervise the next election.
So in effect, it's replacing the NTC, the National Transitional Council.
The first point we need to keep in mind, it will give Libya a legitimate government. The Transitional National Council, led by Judge Abdel Jalil, was not elected. It was just a self-appointed group that led the uprising and the revolution, and then after that was legitimized because of the civil war. This new elected body is important because it's going to give legitimacy to the leadership that's going to emerge, and that's going to be a crucial starting body that will lead this change.
So they will dissolve the current interim government, if I understand it correctly.
The cabinet, the Transitional National Council also. Judge Abdel Jalil said, he's going to resign or retire himself. The other important point as far as making sense of this election, this will also lead to the formation of national army, national police, and hopefully will put the basis for stability in the country and tackling the two thorny challenges. One is the spread of arms everywhere in the country. A brother of mine, I think I told you last time, Khalil, who is a military officer, told me we have guns and arms in Libya that could arm 3 or 4 African countries.
Huh.
The second important goal that could be achieved, or at least we'll have the process that will lead to a resolution to this goal, which is allowing the country to have a stable institutions and the process of building a new Libya, a new republic in Libya, especially when it comes to health, medicine, education, national army, post office, all the other elements of public institution will be rebuilt. And in that sense, that's very, very important. My only fear, and I call for a resolution to this second problem, is the new Libya might be a great model for the whole region, but only if it could resolve the biggest challenge, which is political compromise and also having reconciliation and truth and justice commission that will deal with the 1 million or 500,000 Libyans who are outside Libya, who are ostracized, and who are still in the neighboring countries as refugees, including, of course, the murderers, the torturers, and others. But also we're talking about people who supported the old regime. This is, to me, is going to be the next big challenge. If the new leadership can handle that big challenge, I think the process for building a new democratic, pluralistic, and modern republic are very high.
It seems that all the leading parties are very much concerned with this question of justice.
Yes.
As a prerequisite for reconciliation and reconstruction of the country.
People are having high hopes, and I think this is also be exaggerated a little bit. This is a transitional phase, not going to resolve all the questions. And I'm going to predict there will be groups who will be angry at the transition, angry at the seats assigned to this region, like the eastern region or the other region. There will be people who are angry at some of the leaders, people who are not really used to accepting difference. There will be so many bumps in the way, and I think that's expected. But I think the process, that's why this election is really positive in so many ways. It gives hope and gives people a roadmap that the majority of the ordinary Libyan people will look at as, okay, maybe not next year, the year after, we know where we're going, what's the plan, what are the priorities for us in recovering from the civil war and the dictatorship. And in that sense, this is a very, very encouraging sign. But I learned to be very, very realistic about this. I think when I came back from Libya last December, after visiting the country and giving talks there, people asked me, and I said, I'm pessimistic in the short term, optimistic in the long term. And in that sense, I predict that there will be many, many problems, even setbacks. But this election is a very, very encouraging sign that gives the country a roadmap where people can think about what's going to happen in this year, in the coming 2 years. And then after that, it's up to, of course, to the new elected people to live to the expectations of the Libyan people and to really sacrifice their self-interest by building a new republic, by building new public institutions, and by addressing, quite honestly, the ordinary bread and butter issues like security, like education, like healthcare, like salaries, like building the banks, like, having a rule of law, like rebuilding and reforming the judiciary and the courts. These are the really important step-by-step things that are really important. The other important factor is, I think, the challenge for the new leaders, elected leaders, is to build on the uniqueness and the traditions that really most Libyans agree upon: moderate Islam, rule of law, decentralization, and allowing people to determine their municipalities' budgets, elections, and also revamp the education system that has been in shambles for a long time.
How were seats for the National Congress, GNC, allotted over Libya's geography?
Yeah, it was 120. The eastern region got 60, the southern region 40, and the remaining to the western region. That's one of the thorny issues because western Libya has more population than eastern Libya and definitely southern Libya.
So there was consideration paid to the geographical distribution.
Yeah, and the eastern region, where the whole revolution started, in that region there are people who said, no, we don't trust the West, they're going to dominate us, they marginalize us under the dictatorship. That brings, of course, the issue, legitimate concern, but also it goes back to the complexity of Libyan modern history when the monarchy was dominated by the eastern region, and Libya was a federal monarchy where the eastern region retained that. And the way to resolve that in 1951 was to have two houses, a Congress, a House of Representatives based on the population ratio of the country, and the House of Shuyukh, elders, was based on just a number for each region, the East, the West, and the South. That was abandoned after the discovery of oil, and Libya became a unitary state and was based on government. And since that time, the issue of federalism was always kind of a thorny issue, and it kind of emerged again, but most people rejected the idea, except that there is a council in eastern Libya.
Cyrenaican Council.
National Council, that boycotted the election and called for autonomy for eastern Libya. However, Khalil, people in eastern Libya protested that group, and more people went to the streets of Benghazi and Al-Bayda and other cities protesting them. So far, they have been isolated, and this election surprised everybody by really a large participation of the Libyan people, and also the fact this election was monitored by the European community, by the United Nations, by also President Carter's center in Atlanta, and by all standards, especially in this situation of transition. Most observers thought that the election so far has been quite decent and quite fair.
So this election has really weakened the Federalists, and particularly the Cyrenaican Council, which announced its impending dissolution on Monday.
It did, but I think the best way to answer this, I think in the long run, is to address the question of decentralization in Libya.
Yes.
We take it away from the claims of autonomy and secession. The other important thing is, I think when the new Libya addresses the question of fairness, the question of decentralization, the question of not controlling the resources and positions, I think Libyan nationalism and Libyan self-awareness of the country, which is now very high, will become even much stronger. And these people will express themselves and would determine the affairs of their regions in a fair way. That's really the best answer. So far, it's been positive, but I think addressing these socio-economic, everyday kind of issues that are really normal to ordinary people in all kind of parts of Libya would be the best way to silence and answer all these minority voices that try to say, that the only way we could determine our future and our children is by having federalism, or threatening sometimes even to say, we don't want Tripoli, could control us.
The good news is that it seems all the major parties and coalitions of parties running this time seem to also oppose federalism and support a strong decentralization instead.
Yes, and actually I could tell you about my favorite quote in one of the major demonstrations in the city of Benghazi, the second largest city, the capital of the eastern region. Men and women carried a slogan said, "No to federalism, no to centralization," which is a very clever way, I thought, that we want to determine our affairs, but also we don't want to play with the really ugly metaphor in our own history, or the negative symbolism for federalism, which in Libya means, and also I would say the region means really a prelude for secession.
There seems to have been very little violence. There was some, as you said, sporadic. Any important incidents to mention?
Yes, in the city of Jdabia and the city of Benghazi and on Tobruk, and also the oil ports of Brega and Razazan were attacked. And there were 2 people who were killed, unfortunately. Other than that, the election so far has been, within that context, very, very abnormal situation where there is no army and no police. This has been remarkable, Khalil. And I think that's why I mock all those scholars who keep writing in Europe and our own media sometimes about tribal division and tribal politics and tribal identities. And they forget that people might belong in the rural areas to certain kinship organizations, but at the same time, they have awareness of Libya being Libyans, part of a larger community. And also, 80% of the Libyan people live in urban areas. So the idea to think about tribal divisions because somebody might use it or say this is my name is really absurd.
It's outdated.
It's outdated and it has no meaning. It has no meaning because when you say a tribe, either pre-modern or anti-modern identity, and this is the thing that African studies has battled for a long time. Unfortunately, this old cliche is so pervasive and being used left and right to understand what goes on in Libya. And it also is a cover for not understanding Libyan civil society, Libyan urban and national culture, and how Libyan society, despite all these divisions, sees itself as emerging agreement about the making of a new republic.
And that's the voice of Ali Ahmida, who's a professor of political science at the University of New England, speaking with Khalil Bendib about the significance of Libya's election and that country's transition to democracy. We'll hear more of their conversation after a short break. From Pacifica Radio, this is Voices of the Middle East and North Africa.
Of the world's surprise, or at least the Western world's surprise, the liberal coalition of 58 parties seems to be winning this election, not the Islamist slate that everybody in the West again was expecting.
Yes.
After Tunisia, Morocco, and Egypt, where Islamist electoral victories happened, this comes as an interesting contrast. Is Libya different in that respect, or is the usual dichotomy of Islamist versus secular a little bit more blurred in Libya's political landscape?
Khalil, this is a good question, and it's both. I told people Libya is going to be different because there is specificity and certain conditions that are a little bit different. Yes, there is a commonalities between these societies. We are very aware of that. And there are also ties, economic and social and cultural ties. But each country has its own traditions and its own societal values and public institutions. Libya, in a way, in Libyan society, the distinction, the dominant form of religion is really moderate Islam, moderate Maliki,
yes,
Sufi Islam. And even the Ibadism in the Muslim Libya is also very moderate as well. Now, the idea who's secular and who's Muslim is really an odd one. In Libyan specific culture, when you say somebody is liberal, it doesn't mean that he is not religious. It's just probably will fast during Ramadan and will culturally identify himself as a Muslim or herself as a Muslim. Now, when you say Islamist, in the sense that you're talking about jihadists or fundamentalists, that's really a new development in the fringe in Libyan society. And it's like saying an American is leftist, meaning a liberal. It's a historically specific thing. In Libya, a moderate Islam still plays a role, whether that's for secular or liberals or not. For that matter, it's very important to keep that in mind. Now, Libyan society really is religious in a way, one could say that like American society, which is more religious than European societies. But at the same time, it really doesn't like somebody to come to them and say, I'm going to Islamize you. Or that's why they have a trouble with the Muslim Brothers and with the political Islam, because they find them, who the hell are you to tell me that I'm not a Muslim and you're going to teach me my faith?
Exactly.
Libyan society, in other words, I thought is going to be very different. And I think I'm not surprised, even though I think we are running to this conclusion so quickly because we're talking about only 80% of the seats are assigned for political parties and the rest are for individual seats. But I think Libya will be very different in that sense. May I say, with caution, might be a model, might show that there are diversity within these uprisings. And if Libyan new elected leaders supported by the international community, will continue to be really have the collective service in building these new promises. Libya might be a good model in the coming 5 or 10 years.
Even the coalition leading at the polls, which has been labeled liberal, Mahmoud Jibril's National Forces Alliance, which is supposed to be liberal, it is not clearly identified as either secular or Islamist. And each one of the top parties also emphasizes their moderate character, some while accusing others of secularism or religious extremism.
Yes, and I think, Khalil, we have to keep in mind that because of Libya's traditions regarding religion and politics, the two leaders of both independent Libya, King Idris I of 1951 monarchy, and Colonel Gaddafi and the other junior officers with him in 1969, despite what we think of both of them, they both could not overlook the fact that religion and Islamic faith has a source of positive values and guidance in a moderate way to the rest of the society. And I think this is very important. They might not share a lot of commonalities in terms of temperament and age and values and so, but at the same time, this is a reflection. Religion has a public role to play, but not in controlling or forcing people to become like Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or even Iran for that matter. Libyan society likes to be religious, but in its own way, in a voluntary, private way.
There were 84 female candidates running as independents. 50% of the candidates in party lists were reserved by law for females, though not all parties fulfilled the quota by exact figures. Women's rights, as you know, having been at the center of so many Muslim countries' political battles, how involved politically do Libyan women seem to be so far? You were alluding earlier that they were quite enthusiastic and quite involved. Even Mahmoud Jibril, who's not an Islamist, has made a point of referencing the importance of Sharia in Libya's future legal system.
Yes, well, that's the consensus of the majority of the Libyans. I think Islam as a source, a main source of family law and other aspects of the society, I think that's probably most Libyan will agree upon it. Libyan society, while it's more religious than our neighbors in many ways, but still it's a modern society where it has the highest literacy rate among not only the men, but also the women. This thing escaped so many people who don't know the changes that happened in Libya in the last 50 or 60 years, where it was one of the poorest with the highest illiteracy rate. But from 1951 until now, it's now one of the most literate society, but also where women are fully participant in the process. In the region of Razazan, where I grew up, the participation of women there reached 90%, more than Eastern.
Which is in the south. That's one of the more rural areas.
Rural, supposed to be more conservative.
Yes.
These things you don't find people really paying attention to because they think, oh, Libya, we don't know much about Libya. We know Gaddafi, we know the oil, we know bloody civil war, and he's gone. They look around, they can't understand what's going on. What escaped them, what escaped their writing, and that's why our public opinion in the United States could not really understand it, is that this is a society where women have been leaping in terms of education, in terms of changes, and right now we're talking about how this very economic, educational, and social changes are now surfacing, and people are participating in full, and especially women.
Mahmoud Jibril, who was a prominent figure of the anti-Gaddafi revolution, he's a prominent figure within the National Forces Alliance, which seems to be winning at the moment. All these parties that have coalesced around this group, what do they represent politically and ideologically? What is the common denominator among them?
Mahmoud Jibril has a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh, and he was a classmate of mine in Cairo. He's somebody I've known for years. He is articulating a strata of Libyan society, intellectuals, professionals, but also ordinary people who want a democratic republic based on the rule of law and also development and benefiting for oil and all these kind of concrete aspects. I think he represents a coalition that reflects a very diverse group of people who agree on certain goals. And they also are afraid of foreign domination. They're afraid of the very militant fundamentalist views of Libya, especially Islamic fundamentalist and jihadist views of Libya. They really are the one who were hoping that the old regime will reform itself. Mahmoud Jibril is articulate, educated Libyan political scientist who is able to really reach to many groups. And he representing this very heterogeneous, diverse group who share that common goal. What helped him is articulation, his knowledge, and his ability to travel, since he became one of the leaders of the uprising all over the country and being visible in TV, visible in the media, and he's fluent in both Arabic and also English. So he's a visible guy right now. Whether he will be the leader of furthermore position inside the country, that's to be seen. But most people, they respect that, and they, quite honestly, they look at other figures and they are not as convinced. Now, at the same time, there are exiled groups who returned to Libya, who fought the regime for a long time, like the Front for the Salvation of Libya, like some of the people who were in prison, some who were living in the United States and also in Europe. So the Muslim Brothers, some of them were in prison, some were in exile. And I think they're trying to also lobby for the votes and be part of the new government. I think right now it's premature to determine how long or who will emerge as the new leaders of the country. I think Mahmoud Jibril and the coalition he's leading definitely are the dark horse of this election. The Muslim Brothers, especially their party of justice and reconstruction, are having some success, but distant second. There are other groups also here and there. But right now, by and large, my guess is Libyans are voting. They're selecting people whom they know, individuals, not because of their party affiliation. Because keep in mind, 120 of those people who are going to make this body are individuals. So in that sense, at this stage, Mahmoud Jibril is really a popular emerging leader again, even after a period of kind of distance from the leadership after he resigned. But right now, he and his coalition are the most powerful group, and the election gave them a mandate, definitely, and Mahmoud is really a credible.
Would you give us briefly a very simple sketch of the other major contenders other than Mahmoud Jibril's National Forces Alliance?
Well, there is a party in the city of Misrata, the third largest city, which is the Union Party for the Nation, led by the grandson of an anti-colonial leader by the name of Ahmed Suwaihli, which won most of the votes in the city of Misrata. Its nickname is the Stalingrad of Libya, the city that resisted the regime and was devastated by the Gaddafi's regime. And it has now a military force that's one of the strongest in the region. You also have, I think there's a party that used to be called the Front for the Salvation of Libya, led by Dr. Muhammad Yusuf al-Mgarif, who retired and now he's leading another party. There is also the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the second winner in the election so far. It's called the Justice and Reconstruction Party. That's the name of the party they created. They follow the model of Turkey. They follow the model, of course, of their mother organization, Egypt, which created a party of its own, where Mohamed Morsi won the election in Egypt. In Libya, the name of their party is called Justice and Reconstruction. This is also an important group. It's, of course, we don't know the final result of the election, Khalil. These are the only preliminary signs and preliminary results of the election. This is a wonderful story, Khalil. We should celebrate the courage and the awareness and also the savviness of ordinary people in Libya who came from the ashes after a very devastating civil war. This is a very, very living society that's tried to deal with so many challenges. And I think discovering that and reading about it and empathizing with it is the best thing we can do at this moment. It's a wonderful story.
Ali Ahmida is professor of political science at the University of New England. He spoke with Khalil Bendib about the significance of Libya's election and that country's transition to democracy. To learn more about the first General Congress election in Libya, please visit jadalia.com. From Pacifica Radio, this is Voices of the Middle East and North Africa. Emel Mathlouthi is a young Tunisian singer who grabbed international attention during the Tunisian Revolution of 2011. She was on tour in Tunisia when the revolution happened. One evening, during a sit-in on Habib Bourguiba Avenue in the Tunisian capital, Tunis, she stood up and performed her song, Klemti Horra, I Shall Not Be Silenced. I am the free who never fear. I am the secrets that never die. I am the voice of those who did not submit. I am free and my word is free. By chance, someone recorded her on their mobile phone and posted the video on YouTube. Soon after, the video of her performance went viral and she became an internet sensation. I spoke with Emel about that day and her latest album, Klemti Horra.
A friend of mine, she said, we want you to sing for us today, Klemti Horra. You have to sing it here, not only in France. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But I was scared. I don't want to come and show my face and sing my songs. But in the same time, it was interesting because in our country, music, in the Arab countries in general, music has not been really the means of attacking and the means that can accompany the protests in the street. It was always hard to imagine that. And I think this is why this moment really touched at first the Tunisians, because now Tunisian can recognize me on the street, which was a dream that for me it can never happen. Same if I work all my life. But this moment count for them because it's the first time a song can talk so simply to all categories of the society.
And this was the early days of the revolution.
It was a few days after Ben Ali left. Some of the activists, they organized a sitting for the martyrs with candles. And that was the first time that was happening in Habib Bourguiba Avenue. So I was very proud to be part of this not big event, but we were close to each other's. Everybody was sitting, and there were some people shouting, and there were demonstrations everywhere.
Were you surprised at the reaction?
Yes, I never imagined that it can be so far, because when we went home, I was with my little sister, and she said, "Oh, look, there's your video of yesterday when you sang on the street." I said, "Oh, wow, that's nice." Then I come back to France because I was still working on my album, and my sister called me. She said, "Your song, your video is every day in all the TV, in the radios." I never dreamed that this song, because this song is about those dogs who are robbing the people, the poor people. So this song always gave fear to all journalists. I was never allowed to sing it in the medias. So that was a revolution in itself. Every time I come back to Tunisia, people recognized me on the street. This is very, very strong for me. But they also come and ask me, "Are you who sing Klemti Horra? Thank you for what you did for us. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for your sincerity."
In one of your interviews, you said, I had so little freedom when I was young that I've never been able to resign myself to being passive. Singing was the only way I had of expressing myself. Were you able to perform publicly in Tunisia before the revolution? What kinds of constraints were you faced with?
You can perform in Tunisia, but you can only perform in small theaters, which is very good because we have a lot of small, not a lot, but few of them, and they are directed by big actors, theater actors. It was like a parallel universe and a parallel art, because there is the art that can be shown on TV and the radio, and the other art like cinema, young musicians like me raising. So I was singing in these kind of places, and I started to have an audience. So
independent local art houses.
Yes, this is it. I started to have an audience, but at one moment you cannot go further. So you can die artistically because you don't have opportunities, you don't have nothing. I was happy because with my friends we were playing Queen, for example, and playing Fairuz, and playing rock music and playing electronic music. We were trying everything, and that brought me too much for, I think, the whole of my life. But in the same time, you can perform once in a month, and that's all. You can't reach the medias, you can't reach the TV, you can't reach your people. And I wanted to speak with my Tunisian compatriots.
So are you getting more traction from Tunisia's media right now?
I'm not still happy with that because they played a lot كلمتي حرة, but I have a lot of other songs I wrote years and years before the revolution to speak about the revolution. I want the radios to play all different songs, not only this song because it was discovered on the street that day. They should encourage their artists, and that is missing in our country.
So is that why you left for France in 2008?
Yes, of
because
course.
You wanted to develop your career as a singer?
I wanted to be a singer, as simply as that. I wanted to breathe as a singer. I wanted to survive, not to gain money, but to survive and to show a different face of the Tunisian culture, a different face, a new face of the Tunisian music, which can be played with a guitar, with electronic beats or with rock energy, but with a Tunisian discourse, with a Tunisian reality, speaking about Tunisian society, Tunisian problems.
So how far could you penetrate the art scene in France?
At first it was hard because you have to spend years and years and years making, like they like to say in France, the buzz. At first I started with my guitar. I was alone, and then I started to have musicians, and then I tried to record, and then I sent to some record labels, but they never answer. And then I kept singing in some places and then in some festivals, and then I made my new album by myself. I met some guys that played in my album, but I made it alone. So after, and with the revolution, that has big echoes. I felt like in France also we need revolution. People are really fed up with
the political system.
Yes. And in my audience, I don't have community audience. I have more, like we say, white people, French people than Tunisians or Arab people. And I like that because I want to work on different categories of the society.
حكاولي على حلمة تتعاود كل يوم حلال فيها حرام ولا حرام فيها حلال حكاولي على حلمة تتعاود كل يوم حلال فيها حرام ولا حرام فيها حلال ناس فيها حنوشة وناس فيها نمال حنوشة تعبس عبس 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 على النمال ناس فيها حنوشة وناس فيها نمال حنوشة تعبس عبس 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 على النمال
I noticed that a lot of young artists emerged after the revolution. A lot of songs were written, a lot of clips, a lot of very big projects, I think, with quality. And I'm very surprised because of these young people. A lot of them never did music before, and they are just discovering themselves after the revolution. So this is very good. But I think that with the government, nothing changed. We still don't have means to let our music go to the audience. So some of the radios can believe in you and put your song, but this is very occasional. We need a bigger support. We need to have houses for music in every place in Tunisia, because a lot of youth, they don't have nothing to do the whole day. So they need to have culture and art and music so they can develop their creativity, their dreams. For example, when I was starting music, I don't have a guitar. I didn't have a studio where I can perform. We had nothing. This is why I think we were so creative. But this has to change now.
What you're saying is that the government is not actively promoting the arts, and they are not investing in the arts.
They are investing, but in some specific art, which is not very representative of the youth of today. And we have to be clear, Tunisia of today is full of young people, and those young people, they made the revolution. They sacrificed their life. So we need to give them a lot of support, especially in culture and in art, because this is how the society can develop and can be progressive.
So when you're talking about a perfusion in creativity in the arts after the revolution and the number of young people who are able to express themselves through music, give us some examples.
For example, there is a duet. They are hip-hoppers. They are getting a lot of success on internet, especially on YouTube. They are making songs with what's happening in the medias in Tunisia after the revolution. They are talking about that nothing have changed in Tunisia for poor people. They are describing the reality with such a courage. This is a specialty for hip-hoppers. One of these young hip-hoppers, when he talks, he looks like he's a very shy guy. But there is a transformation when he sings. The duet is called BBG Cly, because there's the influence of American hip-hop, and Medamin Hamzawi.
What about the artist who sang this famous song, and we played it on our show many, many times during the revolution and afterwards, the General?
Yes, the General, yes, El General. He's a young hip-hopper. He's very young, I think he's 21 or 22. The thing that made him very famous after the revolution, that he wrote a song about the president, and he was arrested. Of course, there are other hip-hoppers who worked hard for many years before the revolution. I think for me, the thing that brought revolution is the many efforts of a lot of characters in the society.
During the revolution, you worked with a Tunisian Action Collective, and you organized concert in support of the revolution. I read somewhere that you said very few French artists joined the cause. And then when Fukushima hit, you realized what they really cared about. So does this mean that you're not getting very much support, or the Tunisian revolution did not get very much support from the artists in France?
It didn't, neither by the government. It didn't.
I mean, the government, I understand.
It's okay.
But in terms of artists in France, they did not support the Tunisian revolution, or they did not care about it. Why did they have such a tepid reaction?
They don't care about these Arabic people, maybe. I don't understand, because Tunisia is a very open country. It's very close to France, and we are very inspired by the whole French system because of the colonization. We are not in hate, with this sad past. We are okay. We are in the Tunisian language. We have a lot of French words. Everybody who wants to go in Europe, we go to France and we try to communicate with French artists. But for the day, it's still hard. And I saw the only artist who supported the cause was the Algerian artist, the African artist, but not so much French artists. And let me tell you that the French artists are not engaged anymore. At one period, there were 1 or 2 artists talking about revolution and freedom, but now I think it doesn't exist anymore.
Your latest album, Kelmti Horra, is out on World Village Harmonia Mundi label. Can you talk about the inspirations for this album?
All the songs of this album were written 3 years before, or 2 years and a half before the revolution. I wrote those songs between 2005 and 2009, and I performed a lot these songs on different stages. I had the opportunity and the chance to go a little bit all over the world. I have been to Canada, in Ecuador, in Yemen, in Europe, in Africa. So I performed these songs in front of different audiences and different cultures. I think that gave me a big experience. So the song is not the same as when it was born. And then to work on this album, I wanted some melting between my childhood influences with classical music, classical European music, with rock music, and with electronic music. I wanted to create my own drums. I wanted to create a whole universe like in the cinema. I really believe that I'm like a cinema director sometimes, because I work with a lot of details. For example, if a sound like walking on the carpet, I like this sound, so I record it and put it to make a drum on the album. So I agree that there are a lot of influences on this album, because I'm open to a lot of different music, rock music, the world music, Spanish music.
The album features 10 new songs, which combines, as you said, electronic music, rock, Middle Eastern melodies and tunes, and addresses social issues like freedom of justice, immigration, and also alienation. Can you talk a little bit about the lyrics?
The lyrics were written under the Ben Ali regime, so they are all songs about fighting, about hope against dictatorship.
في القهوة عطينا
have a song in which I say, it's enough, no more sadness, no more tears of our women, no more youth suffering and disappearing. I have another song in which I describe that the road is long, it's true, but we don't have to lose hope. We have to still fight.
When you were writing these lyrics in Tunisia 4 years before the revolution, you knew that you will not be able to publish and record your album in Tunisia. So you were planning to leave and produce your album in France. Is that correct?
I wrote those songs at first to, when you are not well, you try to write something on a paper.
So you didn't know that you're going to turn them into music?
It was natural. I didn't thought about a specific thing to do with those songs, except to help myself and help my compatriots. And then I wanted to put it in an album so I can have more and more listeners. And I was pretty sure that I recorded some of these songs on a small album, but it was recorded at home with a friend. And it just was my first record. But I wanted to go to France and record this big album, and not only record these songs with a guitar and a voice. I wanted to, like I did on this last album, I wanted to create a whole universe, because with all these lyrics I was pretty sure that we can create movies with all the senses.
Emel Mathlouthi's latest CD is titled Kalimti Hurra, or We Shall Not Be Silenced. She spoke with Malihe Razazan. For more information, visit vomina.org or jadalia.com. From Pacifica Radio, this is Voices of the Middle East and North Africa. And for this week, this has been Voices of the Middle East and North Africa. We look forward to your comments and suggestions. You may reach us by email at vomekpfa@yahoo.com or by phone at 510-848-6767, extension 632.
You can download the podcast of our program on the archives page of Voices of the Middle East and North Africa at kpfa.org. Voices of the Middle East and North Africa is produced at the studios of KPFA in Berkeley. Join us again next week for another edition of Voices of the Middle East and North Africa.
قرر الرئيس محمد حسني مبارك تخليه عن منصب رئيس الجمهورية.